Welcome back, my friends, to the sweet spot where IT leaders share the insight with other leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, I have my two co-hosts, Howard Holton and Paul Lewis. How are you doing,
Hello,
guys?
hello.
Hey there.
How's everybody doing this week?
Very good.
Good.
That's fine.
So Paul, it appears we need a real quick way to raise a couple $100,000 and just to blow it immediately on something. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. I'm looking forward to my retirement package that will. Now, imagine the family of four cost $500,000 to do a Disney World tour.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Disney announced a kind of one-time world tour opportunity for 75 people to board a private jet and go to every Disney park around the world in a whirlwindish tour, which frankly sounds both amazing and like the worst possible experience. I don't really want to be on a plane with 73, like figuring my wife being one of the people, right, with 73 other people that, one, I don't know, and two, are caring enough to be able to afford the $100,000 ticket price.
Right. USD. So it's already a couple $100,000 Canadian there.
So it's like $375,000 Canadian.
What I thought was funny was the little disclaimer that says, you should be at least 12 years old to come on this trip. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, if you're bringing kids on this trip, then you have a lot of disposable income.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they put it there because they probably have plenty of people that aren't 12 that that would otherwise be on the trip. And I think if you're paying $100,000, you take whoever the hell you want.
Exactly. Shouldn't matter at that point. No limits.
Yeah. Like at that point, but
one person, $100K.
One per each person, $107,000 USD. Yeah.
Ooh.
Now it includes all your meals.
Oh well, in that case,
well, it has at least the meals.
It's your meals. It's your private jet for the 25 people. All your entrance fees to the parks. That adds up. All your Genie pluses, right?
I mean, for that matter, have you heard Kevin Hart's bit on going to Disneyland?
No.
Worth watching. It's on Netflix. So he talks about how he doesn't do anything normal, and his kids have kind of become used to it, and he's now divorced, right? So they spend time with him. They spend time with their mom. Right. He says, like, I do Disneyland, but I don't do Disneyland like everybody else does Disneyland. He says, I have a private tour guide. The tour guide walks us through the back entrance, right up to the ride, puts us right on the ride. There's no waiting. I'm in and out of Disneyland. I ride every single ride. I'm done in 2 hours. We're in the car. We're driving back home. We're done. He says, my kids call me and go, Dad, can you call your person? What person? The person that let you cut in line. Yeah, but I'm not there. So no. Tell your mom I said, ha 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 ha. I bring that up because for $107,000, you better have that private guide.
That's right.
You better be in and out of the park in 2 hours. Every ride ridden, right? And I want to ride Rise of the Resistance as many times as I want until I am sick of that ride.
So how many days does the tour takes to do all the parks worldwide? Does it say?
It's 27 days, 27, 29, something like that.
Yeah, so you're doing more than one park a day?
Yeah. It starts in California, it ends in Orlando.
Right. I think you've spent way too much time looking at it.
It's a dream. I can have dreams.
It's a dream. Yeah. I mean, we all can, right? Yeah. Like, if you were in Silicon Valley, you probably had a dream late last week that your deposits would be good, that your business would stay open, right? That the nightmare would end. Of course, we're talking about Silicon Valley Bank and the failure thereof.
Do you believe it was because of their woke policies?
Their woke policies?
Yeah. No, you didn't know? You haven't heard that?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, their woke DEI policies and their investment in
Oh no, I don't.
Coastal elite considerations.
Yeah, no, I don't watch that news channel.
I see.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. I don't watch that news channel. Any news channel that has to argue in front of the court that no reasonable person would take what they say as truth is not news. They are news.
Got it. That's right. Air quotes.
Not fake, just news.
Just news. For entertainment purposes only was the argument they made in front of the court.
Right. At least the opinion side. Yeah.
Just saying. So no, I don't believe it was woke policy. I mean, ultimately, they were way over aggressive in their investment strategy, like many were. They made some mistakes that caused a run on the bank rather than giving themselves time to move funds from one side of the house to the other side of the house, as it were, right, from long term to short term, and take the hit. And it caused a failure of the bank, and it was a bank where I want to say 97.5% of the deposits were not FDIC insured. They were too large to be FDIC insured.
Greater than 250.
Which is a crazy thing to think about, right? Because there's not a lot of banks that can say that, right? There's I don't know of another single bank that can say that.
Yeah, it was a small, medium-sized business bank that's focused on Silicon Valley startups, right? VC funded startups.
Yeah, 1,000 users Y Combinator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 1,000 startups.
Small-ish organizations that did all of their banking in this particular institution.
Yep.
And if this particular institution didn't survive, then it was going to negatively affect, their ability to make payroll. Those are all things that are concerned. But I think we should walk through the what happened, because you mentioned a couple, three things there, but I think the progress is interesting to talk about. Right. So if I were to describe what happened, I would say previous administration changed sort of the regulatory boundary of these size organizations, not this particular organization, but smaller than biggest of the big organization, to worry less about sort of stress testing of their.
Well, they got rid of Dodd-Frank, right?
Yeah, exactly. They didn't have to measure as much or as frequently or report that information on whether they had enough sort of cash assets for their deposits, right? Yep. So that happened, previous administration. The inflation occurs, Fed raises rates, that affects the investment side of those kind of banks, right?
Well, I think you're missing a step though too, right?
Okay.
Their deposits were higher than they've ever been before,
right?
And their investment rate was less cash on hand, more long-term investments, because it looked like a good idea at the time. Right. And once you declare an investment bundle a long-term investment, you can't undo a single investment. You have to undo the entire bundle, which is a massive financial hit. And you then have to carry those losses on the books for that that period. Now, also keep in mind, we're technologists, not financial experts. So
don't take financial advice from us.
Don't take financial advice.
There's no financial advice, right? Yeah. This is literally just us talking about as we understand this kind of huge disruption.
Right. Don't take this as go create a bank account in this particular institution. And then lots of things happen. So Fed raises rates for reasonable inflationary reasons. And because of that, some of the lending side of the clients of SVB were getting some cash crunch, right? They had to use more of their cash rather than more of their lending. But at the same time, the investment side of the bank that had long-term investments like MBS, mortgage-backed security investments, were underwater. So they were facing a cash crunch in the bank. The individual clients were facing a cash crunch because they couldn't afford the lending that they had. So they had to use more of their cash. In order for SVB to true up their funds, they needed to sell some of their stock, right? They needed to create more investment for themselves. All those three things happened at the same time. Right?
Well, and they needed to convert those long-term held assets into short-term held assets so they could be traded.
Right.
They didn't do that quick enough. They then made an announcement that they were doing that, which caused some panic, right? Which led to a run on the bank, right? A run on the bank is where everybody tries to get out more money than the bank has cash on hand, which is the one thing a bank can't do. You can never give out more money than you have cash on hand.
Right.
Or, well, what happens? Right? The FDIC comes in and shuts you down.
And in parallel, the stock of SVP crashed while there was a run on the bank. So they had both investors crashing and customers crashing at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a couple, 3 days there where the government took over the organization and said, oh, we better, assess what's happening here. And there's a couple choices, right? The choice could have been everybody fails, right? Bank fails, clients fail, investors fail, shareholders fail, or
okay. I don't think that's
it was an option.
Well,
anybody under 250K was screwed. Anybody over 250K was screwed.
Yeah, so you're screwed, but you're not screwed. Okay, so everybody, that 97% only gets 250K. The other 2.5% or whatever it was, they get all their money because they had under 250K. Okay, cool. So 2.5% are made whole. We can move on from there. Regardless, that's the FDIC insurance pays that.
Right.
So everybody else can get 250, and then that's it.
Right.
However, they're all debtors. They all hold debt in the bank. As the assets are sold, they're then made whole to some percentage.
Right.
They're not that money doesn't just completely go away, right? They're made whole to some percentage. That's how that always works. There's no bailout. There's no tax dollars. The FDIC comes in and takes over the bank and then sells off the assets to raise capital and then attempt to make the depositors whole to whatever percentage that looks like.
Yeah, but that takes time.
Happens in a bankruptcy.
That takes time theoretically.
Yes.
Right? And in the meantime, payroll has to be made, right? Because these are small organizations with people who work there, right?
Yeah, you're able to make maybe the first 250K where the payroll and nothing else.
Right.
And let's hope you don't have like outstanding checks that are written or deposits that you're trying to make that there's no longer an account. Like anything involving cash flow is effectively stopped.
Right.
All of the bad, and there's no good in stopping cash flow. Right.
Yeah. The executives of the organization walked out. Government takes over. Right. That's kind of the process here. Doors are locked. Right.
Yep.
So option one was everybody was screwed. Option two is FDIC says, you know what, we're going to treat this like a human problem, not a sort of corporate problem. And yes, the shareholders, bondholders, investors of the bank won't get any resolve, right? They won't get any relief, but the debtors, the creditors certainly will in that organization.
Yes. And that's actually what was interesting about it, right? Was the FDIC was able to relatively quickly come together, come up with a plan whereby without the taxpayers covering it, so we're not bailing out the bank, they were able to come up with a plan to make every depositor whole by taking a long-term view of the assets and effectively borrowing against those assets using other assets held by the FDIC. Right. And so they can make cash available now to make the depositors whole while carrying the assets that otherwise, they take a bath trying to sell for the long term, also keeping the American people whole because the FDIC is not using, tax dollars to bail it out.
Yeah. Because
having a very interesting kind of resolution. And you could almost hear the collective sigh of relief coming from Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Because the politics of having a whole bunch of startup organizations with thousands of people working for them failing in a single day probably wasn't a good thing.
Well, yeah, it's also not something that's ever supposed to happen, right?
Right.
I mean, ultimately, small business is they're the what's it called? Diversification that allows your economy, your workforce to survive. Right. Like it's really, really bad when a mega corporation goes under, right? A couple 100,000 people and more become unemployed. Surprisingly, you do the same thing to 1,000 small companies, it's worse.
Right.
Yeah, it's much, 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 much worse. And then you also then have to look at this came on the tail of a whole bunch of other Silicon Valley layoffs. Right. And then what does that do for confidence in the banking system? What does that do for confidence in the economy? What does that do for confidence in the employment market? What does that do for confidence in then the trickle down is the housing market? Any major purchase becomes a trickle down, right? Is now the right time to buy a house? Is that an investment I want to make? Do I have the confidence to know that I'll be employed in this location for the foreseeable future? Because this is a good big sunk cost. Is this house going to be worth the same or more in 5 years, right? We're already seeing record numbers of repossessions, right? Loan defaults in automobiles. We're not seeing it in housing yet, but we're seeing record numbers of automobile defaults, right? We really don't need that to trickle over to any other market.
And the real winner here at the end of the day will be the bank who buys these assets for pennies on the dollar.
For sure. Although hopefully the Fed's plan, and as I read the Fed's plan, there was no urgency to then sell the assets, right?
Not now, right, exactly. There could have been a lot of urgency. And all of them would have stepped up and said, "Oh, 3 cents? Here you go. Here's 3 cents."
So it's reasonable.
Make that up in interest.
It's reasonable to assume that that you'll be picking up for a good discount, right? 80 cents on the dollar,
right? But
no longer 3 to 10 cents on the dollar.
Do we know who did that?
Who did what?
Who bought the assets?
Oh no, the assets. As far as I know, the assets haven't gone up for sale yet. And like I said, the Fed's plan allows them to not make that a fire sale.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be as cheap as it could have been.
Right.
But a couple stepped up immediately. HSBC stepped up immediately and said, "Hey, this is something I'd like to invest in, just to increase my portfolio in this particular geography."
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Isn't that similar to what happened with the GameStop? That they lost some of their value on, like, the bank, that they didn't have enough to cover.
So GameStop is a really interesting story for those that followed it. If effectively they were being wholesale shorted, their stock was being wholesale shorted, which of course on purpose. Yes. There are groups that's what they do. They find a company that's financially weak. They short the stock, and they buy every option to short the stock. They hold those options, which of course makes everybody, that sold that option motivated to maintain it. The point of which is to drive the stock value down so low that it gets delisted, which effectively turns the thing into no value, giving them the ability to then sell it for parts. Right. What happened in that, and that's been done. Corporate raiders have been doing that for decades. Right. What happened in that case was Wall Street Bets. Some people on the Reddit subreddit Wall Street Bets found out about it and said, "Hey, this is happening. Let's see if we can fuck with them." That's literally what it was. No one expected to make progress. And if you look at historically, Wall Street Bets does this all the time, and they always lose money. And that's actually their goal. Their goal is to mess with the system. Right. In this case, however, it was GameStop, and GameStop hits a particular group of generations in a real positive way, myself included. Right. It actually is. It's a company that has nostalgic meaning for people. I have no interest in the corporation. I don't think it's been well run for decades. At the same time, I don't really want corporate raiders to be able to tear a piece apart of GameStop.
Right.
And so what happened instead was millions of people got involved and bought what they could, and it didn't matter what they bought. The stock was pretty cheap, and they just held it.
Yep.
Right.
Driving up the price.
Yeah, it started with hundreds, then it was thousands, right? Then it was tens of thousands, and about that point, the stock didn't continue to drop. It leveled and then started to rise because there's a whole bunch more trading volume.
Yep.
At that point, everybody got involved, and the stock went from something like $5 a share to $160 a share to $250 a share to, I want to say it topped out in the $4s. Before, of course, there's nothing has changed to equal that value. So it started to tumble again, but not to the point where the people holding the options weren't losing an absolute fortune every week.
Right.
And at that point, their sunk cost is so high, they kind of have to stick with it until they run out of money, right? Until it doesn't look like it's going to tumble down to being worth $1. And every single day that goes by, they're renewing options at an enormous cost in the aggregate, right? And what ended up happening was two things. One, a whole bunch of small traders made a ton of money. Two, GameStop was saved. Still, you run into the ground by the same people that were running it into the ground before.
Its own fundamentals.
Correct. And three, a bunch of corporate raiders got smashed hard, right? I mean, that was a multi-billion-dollar mistake on their part. The same exact thing immediately happened with AMC, right? Not to the multiple level, but the same kind of corporate rating was occurring, same short selling. Wall Street Bets jumped on that one. That didn't have the 100x or 50x multiplier that GameStop did. It had more of like a 10x. But as part of that, right, AMC and GameStop both did some internal fundraising, right? Sold off some shares, did some fundraising, gave them some more operating capital, and it hands down saved AMC.
Yep. In all three of these circumstances, the business fundamentals were wrong, right? The leadership was doing something off or riskier than they should have done, given what other decisions they could have made. Right?
Sure,
they could
have invested they weren't reacting to market dynamics properly. Sure. They were arrogant. They were, undercapitalized.
They didn't appreciate their competition. Yeah, right. They didn't evolve their business models. Right. Yep. They blockbustered themselves. Right? All those are interesting and consistent. I think what's also interesting with the Silicon Valley Bank example is that from a macro perspective, I wonder if we are investing too much in consumer good technology. Yes, we should invest in big, complex technology problems, but do we need another 1,000 apps in the App Store? Right? Do we need? Is that a healthy part of the world? I don't know. I'm looking at that saying, at some point, there's too much.
I don't know that I necessarily agree. And I don't know that we need to necessarily change our investment strategy, right? I mean, I think anyone that didn't see SVB and go, holy crap, I need to make sure I'm diversified when I'm no longer insured. Yeah, that probably is a good wake up call, right? Like if all your eggs are in that one basket, that's the 16th largest bank in the country, and they failed in a day.
Right.
It wasn't like we saw the warning signs coming from a mile away, right? When the banking crisis happened, right, and WAMU failed, which is the largest failure, SVB being the second, we kind of saw that coming. There wasn't a whole lot you could do about it, but you could kind of see that coming. You could see kind of banking struggles coming from a long way away. And it's not like banks don't fail, but the 16th largest bank, the second largest ever bank failure, there should have been warning signs, and there really weren't a ton of warning signs, right? Again, not in finance. So those who study finance and specifically study banking and the health of banks may have seen that coming, and they may see more coming. But all of us saw what was coming with WAMU.
But you don't see from a clientele of SVB perspective that we're over investing in non-innovation in the technology side.
I mean, yeah, but
is there really technology innovation that's coming out from the next game on the iOS marketplace?
Well, no, but that's not why they invest, right? They're not investing in They're not investing in innovation. They're investing in capital. Like they're just looking for a return, right? Can I beat the S&P 500 by investing in 50 game companies? Well, I mean, if one of them does what Angry Birds does, then yes, the answer is
sure,
right? And they're not even thinking that all 50 of them are going to hit. They're just thinking all that I need is one of them to hit, and it covers all that investment, right? So, are we investing intelligently? I don't know. Like, are we creating a bit of a bubble? Probably. Do we need to slow it down? I'm not sure we do. Right? I'm not sure I'm not sure that there's an easy button to say this is what it should look like versus this is what it does look like. Right. And I think it's dangerous to try to do that.
To modify the environment to invest in some things and de-invest in others because we're taking out the entrepreneurial spirit or the capitalist environment.
I mean, I'm far less worried about the capitalist environment than I am the entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
Right. I think encouraging people to start companies to boost the economy, I think is good. I mean, should we be doing more due diligence? Yeah, without a doubt. Right. Should we invest in our money smarter? Does the investor community, does the VC community need to be smarter about where they put their funds? Absolutely. Right. I mean, you can look at whatever the new hotness is and see, there's a ton of companies that, especially as a customer, that you look at and you go, there's nothing here. How did you raise $130 million? You have nothing. There's nothing really.
A lot of platitude in this website.
Right. And you just kind of go, okay, well, that's a problem I think Silicon Valley needs to fix. Right. Or the investment community needs to fix, right, is how do we make sure we're investing in the right technology and in things that ultimately are better for the world, and people that have interest in making a better world. That's a little bit of a pipe dream because that's not really their goal. Their goal is to make money, right? And I've seen just as many good companies be unicorns and hit that $1 billion valuation and sell as I have smoke and mirror companies that sell. Right? Like, you know what I mean? So it's very hard to say, don't invest in that smoke and mirror company that gives you your 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 50x ROI.
Right.
Right. Because that's not a good indicator that you're not going to get your money back.
I'm just less enthusiastic about potentially 1,000 small tech organizations that aren't contributing any new innovative value to the marketplace of ideas. They're just clones of GPT, right? They're just clones of blockchain. They're just implementations without a purpose.
Well,
and,
I don't.
and there's
I mean,
1,000.
I agree with you, but at the same time, one, there's all 1,000 of those companies are just, it's statistically improbable that they were that, right? So some percentage of them probably aren't adding anything. At the same time, there has to also be some percentage of them that start with nothing new. They just don't have anything new to offer, and yet, as part of their fundraising, as part of their kind of evolution as organizations, have the potential to create something new or acquire something new as part of that journey. Right? I am certain that the world is full of stories where, we started with smoke and mirrors and ended up building something that changed the world. Right? I mean, the story of Harley Davidson is kind of smoke and mirrors, right? And yet you can't dismiss Harley's impact on the world. And I'm not picking on Harley at all. I'm a fan, but how many companies got their initial funding through pure smoke and mirrors and ended up changing the world?
Enough of them for it to be a good thing.
Yeah, and so they dog paddled for a while and they tread water for a while until they were able to do something. And maybe they have an amazingly wonderful vision, but that amazing, wonderful vision doesn't get you funded, right? But a clone of ChatGPT gets you funded, right? So,
is there any point where there's a consumption saturation? And is there any point when I look at any of the marketplaces and say, that's too much? I can't consume this. I can't. This is overwhelming.
Oh, every one of them is there.
Yeah, I've devalued the individual because of the mass.
Yeah, no, it's all there.
Right.
And we're there in everything, right? We have a consumption problem everywhere. I'm a very casual video game player, and Carlos, you might appreciate this. I bought a Steam Deck, like I don't know, 1 million other people did. Right. I was lucky enough to get it fairly. I placed my order 36 seconds after pre-orders went open.
Nice.
How I know that is because you had to know that in tracking when your order would get produced.
I see.
Yet I was still about 4 months into receipt of my Steam Deck. That's what that volume of orders looked like within the first 36 seconds, right? And I tracked it every single day. Every day, I wanted to know where am I in the queue and how far away is the queue. Not that it was helpful; it just was something I did. I am like everyone else. I got my Steam Deck, and the number one complaint wasn't this thing sucks. Wasn't I don't know what to do with it. Wasn't it's failed in some way. It's awesome, and it's a great piece of hardware that I could spend an entire episode talking about. My complaint was I have 500 Steam games I've never played. Right. I mean, when we look at marketplaces and the absolute flood of things we have coming at us. Yeah, every single marketplace in every single way is flooded, right? And Etsy, we use Etsy as an example, right? Etsy started from a really good place. How do we take small creators that are currently only able to get some kind of local penetration and give them a worldwide penetration?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so go look at Etsy, because today Etsy is 1% creator, 99% outsourced junk from wherever. Right. Mass-produced crap that you can brand from India, Pakistan, Vietnam, China, Taiwan, right? AliExpress. Right.
Yeah, there's no one of a kind there anymore.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's almost impossible to find the small artisan handcrafted goods on Etsy. For a while, you could use price to figure it out, right? Oh, that price is too good to be true, and you can still kind of do that. But even some of the outsource, the dropship companies have figured out if all they do is raise their price, they're still going to make enough sales, right? Amazon, another great example. Search for an Android car stereo. You'll get 57 results that are the same exact car stereo with a different logo on them.
Right.
You don't make any of those things. Right. So are we oversaturated? Yes, absolutely. Every market is oversaturated.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, 1977, right? The company that invested in Star Wars blew away the competition, right? Were there a lot of other movies to invest in? Absolutely. Did anyone expect that one to do well? No, not even Lucas. Right? The spaghetti westerns, another great example, right? The director called Clint Eastwood's agent called Eastwood and said, hey, have you seen Variety? And he said, no. And he goes, well, go open Variety. And he opened it and he goes, okay, cool. There's an Italian movie that's absolutely kicking ass. Why do I care? And he went, dummy, that's your movie. No one expected that to happen. It was a cheesy movie. Jaws, same thing. No one expected that to happen. No one expected Facebook or Amazon to be as big as they were, right? One of my favorite stories is it Parker Warbley? What's the glasses company called? Like Warburg or something. Anyways, there's a guy that gives a really good talk on how how those guys came to him and said, hey, we need this money. And he said, cool, what are you gonna do with it? Like, what's your plan? And they're like, oh, we're gonna work in our day jobs while we get this thing off the ground. And he said, no, I'm not gonna invest in you. I won't invest in anybody that doesn't dedicate 100% of themselves. He said, now they're worth like $5 billion. I'd have made 100 to 1. Right? Like that happens all the time. And you kind of have to invest in 100 to hope that one's going to hit, or 1,000 to hope that one's going to hit. And I'm just concerned that if we say we need to be a whole lot more conservative because the marketplace is buried, that we're going to miss out on those things that truly are innovative, those things that truly are useful.
It's much more difficult to find the needle in a haystack when there's hundreds of haystacks.
It's hard to find the needle early.
Right.
It's much easier to find the needle when it's no longer the needle. Right? Like if you weren't an early adopter of Amazon, yeah, you could have totally missed it. You could have just gone to Barnes and Noble or your local bookstore forever, and then one day all of a sudden you're hit by that big smile logo, and you can't miss it. Facebook, same thing, right? Like that. But again, that happens all the time. Right? There were 1,000 Facebook competitors. There were 1,000 Reddit competitors. There were 1,000. I don't insert whatever. Eventually, there's not.
Yeah.
Right.
And to circle the conversation, did you know that the Around the World tour of Disney includes a night at the Lucasfilm ranch?
I did not. It actually changes how I think about it just slightly. I still don't have $110,000. nor would that be how I spent 110,000. Like that buys a really nice car.
Right. And you're not going by yourself, so it's $250,000.
Oh no, my wife's ticket's on my wife. I don't know how she's gonna
She's gonna pay for it. I'll meet you at the airport if you can afford it.
Yeah. Sorry, babe, gotta go. I mean, you would be divorced by the time you got home, but
right, you'd have a great trip.
Yeah, locks would be changed in 3.5 minutes. You wouldn't even make it to the airport. The locksmith's already over changing the locks on your house. Well, ma'am, so do you need two keys for that? No, one is fine. One is fine. Thank you very much.
One is fine.
So, if we take a look at after this whole conversation, what should IT leaders pay attention to?
Diversification. And it's not the first time we've talked about diversification, right? A year ago or 2 years ago, we talked about supply chain issues during COVID. So, right, probably 2 years ago. And my recommendation was the same then. It was diversification, right? If I learned anything from the supply chain issues of COVID, it was I cannot depend on one supplier for anything in my organization. So I need to have at least two options. I need to be diversified. Even if it's only 20%, I still need to be diversified. And the same is true within banking, right? Diversification is what you need to do within your career, within your knowledge base, within your experience, right? Diversification is always a smart play.
Yep. The only exception, of course, is hotel and airline loyalty. But yes, I agree with everything Howard just said.
That is true. If you have if you travel, you can get top tier status on 3 airlines. I say do it.
Whole different situation. I agree. Right. If that's possible, then right. Yes.
But yes, that is absolutely a cup you fill until it is full before looking at another cup or bucket.
Right. Yeah.
But I will say, as someone that was able to fill 2 of them to the brim in multiple years, it's absolutely cool to do.
Nice. Only if you could transfer the points between them all, because you want to be able to use them for personal vacations and you don't want to split the family up.
It actually worked out really well for me. I filled Southwest multiple years and United multiple years. If I go on a trip, it tends to be United. If I send someone else on a trip, I tend to use Southwest.
You? Spirit Airlines. Me?
Yeah, kind of.
First class.
Yeah, kind of. You want me to pay for the flight? Oh, yeah. You're going to use the Southwest. and I'll fly Southwest as well, but Southwest is generally a kind of short leg versus United is what I reserve for long legs.
That's right. I hope it's going where you're going.
If not,
I hope it's within driving distance of where you're intending to
go. I kind of figure 80%. If I can get you, since I'm paying for it, if I can get you 80% by flight and you have to hoof it and thumb it for 20%, it's still a net win.
That's a good one.
I'll get you to Europe, but you're going to find your way to Berlin.
Right. Well, it's Southwest, so I can get you to Mexico. The rest of Europe, the boat's on you. I don't know what to tell you.
That's a good one. Well, that was a good chat. Understanding that as leaders, we need to understand the diversification so we can be ready in case something happens is actually always a good idea. My friends, make sure that you share, you subscribe, and we'll see you on our next episode.